Robinson Crusoe. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Robinson Crusoe by an anonymous author. Abridged for young readers for the McLaughlin Brothers Aunt Kate series, 1880. I was born at York in the year 1632, of a good family. My father's name was Crusoe, a native of Bremen, who by trading at Hull gained a very plentiful fortune. He married my mother at York, and as her maiden name was Robinson, I was called Robinson Crusoe, which not being easily pronounced in the English tongue, we are now called, and indeed call ourselves, and write our name Crusoe. No pains or charge was spared in my education, my father designing me for the law. Yet nothing would serve me but I must go to sea, both against the will of my father, the tears of my mother, and the entreaties of friends. I was then, I think, 19 years old, when one time, being at Hull, I met a schoolfellow, going with his father, who was master of a ship to London, and telling him of my roving desires, he assured me of a free passage, without imploring a blessing, or taking farewell of my parents. I took shipping on the 1st of September, 1651, for London. After making several voyages from thence to the coast of Guinea, I finally sailed for the Brazils. Then northward upon the coast, till our ship made Cape Augustine, in order to gain Africa, from whence, going further into the ocean, we met with a terrible tempest. When the weather cleared up a little, we found ourselves upon the coast of Guinea. We then laid our course for the Leeward Islands, but a second storm succeeding drove us to the westward, so we were afraid of falling into the hands of cruel savages, or the paws of beasts of prey. In this distress, one of our men cried out, "Land! land!" which he had no sooner said than our ship struck upon a sandbank, and the sea breaking over her, we expected all to have perished immediately. While we stood looking at one another, expecting death every moment, the mate laid hold of the boat, and with the help of the rest flung it over the ship's side, and all getting in, we committed ourselves to God's mercy. When we had been driven about a league and a half, a large wave came rolling astern of us, and overset the boat. I was overwhelmed with water, going I know not whither, but, as I thought, into a dismal gulf unknown, while all my companions were overpowered and entombed in the deep. I was at length dashed against a piece of rock in such a manner as left me senseless, but recovering a little, before the return of the wave, I pushed forward and reached the mainland. Tired and almost spent, I sank down on the grass by the cliffs of the shore, free from the dangers of the foaming ocean. I cast my eyes around to behold what place I was in. I could see no house nor people. I was wet, yet had no clothes, hungry and thirsty, yet had nothing to eat or drink. The darksome night coming upon me, I got up into a thick bushy tree, and seating myself so that I could not fall, a deep sleep overtook me. It was broad day the next morning before I awoke and came down from the tree. The tempest had ceased, and the ship lay about a mile from the place where I was. I resolved to swim to the ship and leaped into the water. After I reached it, I found great difficulty in getting on board. Finding the provisions in good order, I crammed my pockets, and losing no time, ate while I was doing other things. I fell to work, and flung overboard several spare yards, a spare topmast or two, and 2 or 3 large spars of wood, tying every one of them with a rope, that they might not drift away. Then I went down to the ship's side, and tied the spars fast together in the form of a raft, and crossed them with the plank, until I found it would carry a considerable burden. I then considered what I should load it with. I first lowered down all the plank and boards I could get, then 3 seamen's chests, which I filled with bread, rice, Dutch cheese, dried goat's flesh, and corn, some clothes, and some bottles of wine. Next the carpenter's chest, some fowling pieces, powder and shot, besides several other weapons. I then put to sea, and after many trials, landed in a cave on the bank of a little river. Not far off I espied a hill of great height, and there I resolved to go and view the country, that I might see what part of it was best to fix my abode in. I found I was on an island, a place inhabited, probably, only by wild beasts. When I went back to the raft, I brought my effects on shore, and made a kind of hut with my chests and boards, piling the empty chests and casks in a circle to fortify it against any sudden attack. I had been 12 times on board the ship, bringing away all that was possible, including ship stores, carpenter's tools, ammunition, weapons, etc., a compass and spyglass, a large amount of gold and silver, and when I looked out the next morning, the ship was no more to be seen. I now began to think how I should secure myself from savages and wild beasts. At one time I thought of digging a cave, and at another I thought of erecting a tent, and finally I resolved to do both. I found a steep rock by the side of a hill, and there I resolved my tent should stand. I drove in 2 rows of stakes, enclosing a space of some 10 yards, in a half circle. Then with my boards and plank I built me a little castle. I had no door, but went in and out by a ladder which I made. Here was my fortress, into which I carried all my riches, ammunition, and stores. After this I added a cellar, thatched the roof, and made many other improvements, which cost me many a day's labor and pains. During all this time I yearned for some companion to whom I could talk. I had taken from the ship 2 cats and a dog, and these often accompanied me in my rambles. On one of these, coming upon some parrots, I knocked one down, and took it home with me. After a while I taught it to talk, and it did much to relieve the dullness of my home. At another time I carried home a kid that my dog would have killed had I not stopped him. I had been often thinking of getting a kid or 2, and so raising a breed of tame goats, and I thought this a good time to make a beginning. One day I found some barley and rice springing up near my castle. I had emptied an old sack at this place, little thinking that the thoughtless act would point out to me a way of getting an ample supply of food. But so it happened, for it taught me to raise crops. But it was a long time before I learned to grind or sift my grain, and to make it into bread. During all my stay on the island, I had kept a record of time, by cutting a notch each day upon a square post, making the notches longer for Sundays than for other days.